Good afternoon, Dr. Hannah and my friends. So we are from Group 8 MGM4321 Company Law, and this is activity 3. So we find an issue relating to breach of contract by an auditors of company security, which the case is Ye Tek Pa and Arnold versus Wong Ngap Lim and Arnold. So let's continue, and this I will pass to my friends to explain this. Thank you.
My name is Chen Teng. I will explain the first question. The first question is explain what are the laws that been breached and why the person was charged. Where the registered shareholder permitted the company secretary to adjudicate and execute the transfer to shares to beneficial owner, contrary instruction were provided in the midst of the procedure to bring it to a stop to decide whether the company secretary was negligent in fulfilling his responsibilities to the beneficial owner. The High Court first had to examine whether the company secretary under this beneficial shareholder a duty of care. Section 241 of the Companies Act 2016 sets out that any person who wishes to act as a company's secretary would need to register as one with a register. Paragraph 28 of this guideline sets out that a company secretary must at all times act honestly and use responsible diligence in the charge of his duties. Next page. And this is the form from the plaintiff as to the reason for bringing the duty. A contract between them and the company secretary, which had been breached, or the second one is that the company secretary owed them a duty of care in carrying out the transfer, which he had breached when he failed to do so. Okay, I will pass to next presenter and explain next question. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Liu Yang, page number 199543. So I will explain what are the sentences given. This page. So for this page, the sentence given the first is for the statement of agreed facts. The plaintiff's agreed facts cannot be found to be accepted by the defendant. It does not follow that the plaintiff's agreement facts was to be treated as accepted by the defendant unless over process the defendants choose to accept the same, which they did not. The agreed facts was nothing more than the plaintiffs agreed the facts for the defendants to accept. Therefore, there is no evidence that the defendant accepted the plaintiff's agreed facts. So for the second one, the crime based on the contract, the fact that the GE has brought to the take file and the documents related to the transfer does not mean that a contractual relationship has been established between them at all. Even if the contract is created, it is a contract between the FACO and the GE, not WNL. So next page. So for the third one is about the crime based on the negligence. No places consideration affecting the duty of care of the company secret to the beneficial owner of the shares. And the next one is no breaches of duty of care. The crime by the Yet and the Yemen based on grants is also untestable. So for the final one about the basis and the crime filed by the WBSM is dismissed on the ground of wrongdoing of the relevant parties without considering the interest of the claims. Next page. So for the final the plaintiff's claim just against the first defendant is dismissed with the process first at 13,000 ringgit to be paid by the plaintiffs jointly and seriously and subjects to the payment of the user acquisition. The second defendant's claim is dismissed, but with the low order as two costs as plaintiffs had indicated that they are not seeking any costs against the second defendant. So that's all for me.
Okay. So I'm Go, metric number 209322. So I will present the part what was he supposed to do to prevent this charge against him. So there are three actions that we suggested. So the first one is next. Okay. The first one is company secretary should ensure that any provisions in article of associations in relation to share transfer have been complied with. For example, if a share transfer required the approval of the director, this should be obtained by a resolutions of board. Instead of stating that they were duty bound to LCM, who was still the registered owner of the shares, it is suggested that the resolutions from the board of director should be attached when writing to YTF and Co. as a proof that LCM instructed them to discontinue the transfer of shares pursuant to the letter date on 18th of June 2019. Thus, the company secretary can clarify clearly that they did not breach their own duty of care. So next. The second action is the company secretary should be familiar with the procedure of share transfer and ensure that it is kept completely up to date. For example, GE wrote to YTF and Co. on 25th of June 2019 to state that the cessation of transfer of shares 1 week after LCM instructed them on 18th of June 2019. So this action might not be appropriate enough and not fast enough, as the company secretary has to always keep beneficial shareholders updates. Nevertheless, GE should obtain a legit letter of cancellations of shares transfer from LCM. Then, on that day or the next day after LCM's instructions, GE should immediately write an email to inform YTF and Co. about the cancellations of transfer of shares. Thus, it will show the professionalism of the company secretary in taking care of the right of the beneficial shareholders and probably avoid sue by the YTF and Co. So next slide. The third action is company secretary should determine the standard of care by referring to the guidelines set out by MAI CSA as well as the CCM. So for example, like sections 241 of the Company Act 2016 set out that any person who wished to act as a company secretary would need to register as one with the registrar. And also paragraph 28 of this guideline set out that a company secretary must at all times act honestly and use reasonably diligence in the discharge of his duty. So in other words, a company secretary should ensure that such duty are carried out with the knowledge and skill that will be reasonably expected of someone without the same experience and qualifications as him. So that's all for me. I will pass to the next presenter.
Thank you, Go, for the explanation just now. So I am Chan, and I will continue the lesson learned by the young auditor or the secretary. So from this case, right, the secretary need to do something like they need to ensure do something that below the minimum standard of care required. So the standard of care is measured against the reasonable man. For example, they need to determine the factors like a reasonable man have acted as a defendant has done if it would have faced with the same circumstances. So for example, right, the secretary need to determine the standard of care by referring to the guidelines like Gov had mentioned just now, so that it will not repeat the same mistake again. So it will not, you will not have to be fined, or you need to pay some fine to them. So thank you and stay safe.